All right, thanks, Jim. We're currently staring at IconoIQ, which Jim was just speaking about, and this is our Iconoculture's database of consumer and cultural trends. It now houses 80,000 data points of consumer research and analysis across demographics, industries, and geographies. First thing we're going to do is look at the syndicated information available on our site. This can be seen by anyone who has purchased SocialIQ add-on, and I think it's a good way to think about social media data is through the lens of one of our big ideas for 2010. So I'm going to pull up one of our big ideas for 2010, social media scale back.
As Josh pulls it up, I think the one we're going to look at is around some of the chatter that we've seen around Facebook and Twitter and social networks in general. This particular trend that's called, coming up on screen in just a second, social media scale back. It's really about how consumers are really trying to figure out a better way to gain better control of what's going on in their online lives as they are exposed to more people in more larger groups, and some of the changes that Facebook and other services like Twitter have made them that much more open and that much more unsecure. So consumers are really thinking about and rethinking how their relationship with social media should occur.
And it might take a moment here if there's a lag, so just bear with us for a second. What you see here is one of our Iconoculture trends for social media scale back, the trend that Andrew was just introducing. Along the top, you see a box that includes a number of key insights, and this is broken out by data source. So all Iconoculture clients and subscribers get access to the key analysis and the consumer implications, and anyone who purchases the IconoIQ or the SocialIQ product gets the social media analysis as well. That's the second bullet in the gray box here. In addition to that, there's a widget along the right-hand side that houses some of the social media information that we've captured from our partner Collective Intellect. I can click in on one of those right now to launch a window. This is a chart that shows some of the social media chatter around a couple of recent Facebook announcements. So Facebook is obviously one of the biggest players in the social media space, and there's obviously a lot of talk around it at all times. But here we pointed out a couple of interesting data points. One is a big spike when Facebook announced that they were going to roll out vanity URLs, so the ability to get facebook.com/yourname was announced, and people talked quite a bit about it. But then less of a spike, at least immediately, when it came to the question of Facebook changing its status, its users' status updates to public.
And we saw a little bit more activity right around the end of the year when Facebook subscribers went in and checked out their profiles and were given a pop-up that showed them that they needed to take care of changing the specific settings within Facebook, how much they wanted to be open. So there's more about it over the year, but I think one of the things this shows that's kind of interesting is this sort of land rush to get a vanity URL right around that particular week in June, and that it over time sort of petered out and wasn't that interesting, but we typically see that kind of thing when that level of customization pops up, and it's something for us to pay attention to.
So this is just an example of one thing we see through our social monitoring tools, and then we take that kind of information and put it into context to the rest of the trend. So the rest of the trend will talk about the context surrounding that idea and that specific insight. We can now click to access the live data, and this should take us to the Collective Intellect site where we can look at some of the metrics a little bit closer. So what we see here are three metrics popping up around activity, sentiment, and sources. And I think while it's interesting to look at Facebook and to consider the topic of Facebook, there's some other topics that are equally interesting and might be able to show us some more stuff. So we're going to be looking at the topic of avatar, 3D technology, and 3D movies. So I'll be dragging that up in just a second.
So one of the reasons why we like to look at things like launches of avatars is because it's a big cultural event, and obviously in this instance it's a combination of not just an event but also a technology. new types of technology that are, in some cases custom made for the movie. So at least for the Media, Entertainment, and Technology group, it's a really good one to look at because you have a cultural change in terms of the kinds of media that are available, and you also have new technologies that are introduced, the concept of watching 3D movies at home and that kind of thing. So tracking the conversation online can help us, whether it's in blogs, boards, the news, whatever, can really help us figure out where people are and what they're talking about.
So along the top here, we see an activity bar that shows activity around the three topics: 3D movies, Avatar, and IMAX. And obviously, the pink one is Avatar, and that's the conversation that's dominating these three in the social media space. There are a few things worth pointing out here. One is a spike in activity back around late August. We saw that when the trailer was released for Avatar, I think at Comic-Con. And then obviously as December came about and the movie was rolled out, we saw a number of large spikes, both as the movie hit the press and then as people began talking about it in the social media space.
So what I find interesting here is really where a lot of that concentration ended up falling, a lot in microblogs, especially around the end of the year around Avatar. So people literally walking out of the theaters and having conversations about what they just saw and trying to contextualize that in the decisions that their friends might make about seeing the movie, which is really important for a lot of the media clients because they have to really move, quickly to figure out if there's not a lot of activity, where are they missing, what platform should they be on, and how should they change their media mix.
Yep, and what Andrew is speaking about here is this sources metric. So in the lower right, the metric that looks like a target here shows the four sources that we track. One is blogs, another is message boards, another is microblogs, and another is news or traditional media. And as Andrew just said, you can see that the activity in this case is heavily focused in microblogs, much less so, at least for the time period that we're looking at now, in news and boards. And that's pretty typical for a media topic. If you look at a number of other topics in other industries, you'll see that the shape of that footprint is much different. So a topic like a financial services topic is frequently news-driven, and you'll see a much bigger footprint in the news area for something like financial services, whereas the microblog activity there would be much less. So looking at the sources can be another way to sort of see where the conversation is and see how it's taking shape. The third metric we have to look at here is sentiment, and you see here slightly differing sentiments for the three topics that we have up. The green represents positive sentiment, the gray is a neutral sentiment, and the red is a negative sentiment. So relatively similar positive sentiment for both the technology around 3D movies and for the content Avatar, and negative sentiment you see slightly less negative for the IMAX movie technologies compared to 3D movie technologies in general.
I think what's most interesting here to me about this and about Avatar as a profile is that it kind of underscores how consumers are looking for great content experiences, not just technology-driven ones. And that's something that I think Avatar, as an experience, as a technology, and as a movie, given its content, given the fact that the 3D technology itself kind of goes away and you are actually watching a movie. I think that has a lot to do with the way people want to see it. They go to the IMAX showing of it because the IMAX showing is the way that you probably should see it. And we hear a lot of that from consumers, and this is another tool to help us do that and help us track that kind of sentiment.
So the last metric we're going to look at is this theme grid here, and this one might take a little bit of explaining. Basically what happens is we create searches or complex queries around a number of topics. In this case, we're looking at the topic we built for Avatar. The technology goes out and then scrapes blogs and brings in any of the social media mentions that correlate to that search. So you get a big bucket of results. Then some semantic filtering or a software that looks for linguistic patterns we use to create this theme chart. So that then separates them out into linguistic themes that are appearing within the search queries. And this is a good way to bring up things that you may not have anticipated seeing. So if you create a topic around Avatar, you may anticipate such themes as movie, 3D, that kind of thing. But possibly themes like 3D glasses or complaints about 3D glasses or complaints about 3D technology might be things that you may not have anticipated seeing. So the theme chart here really lets people sort of see conversations that are emerging. And that is, we can see that through this. Obviously, the movie theme is the largest for this topic, but there are some other themes here that are interesting, such as 3D glasses.